On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. For these sacred words,
thanks be to God.
Thank you for that, choir. That song was my great-grandmother's favorite hymn. I will arise and go to Jesus. So I think of her every time I hear it. She was an interesting person. She got struck by lightning, but survived. And she lost her hearing, but she made delicious homemade bread. I'm not sure this is on. Is this working? Yeah. Okay. And she had a purple bedroom. Everything in the bedroom was purple. I'll never forget it. But anyway, so I'm going to sit down on this chair to do this sermon. The choir was kidding me that I should have like a guitar and do like a spoken word kind of a thing. But anyway, so I'm going to begin this sermon today by playing a commercial that aired between 1978 and 1981, and I am almost sure that you will remember it, and it goes like this.
It took Beethoven 4 years to write that symphony. Some things can't be rushed. Good music and good wine. Paul Masson's Emerald Dry. A delicious white wine. Paul Masson wines taste so good because they're made with such care. What Paul Masson himself said nearly a century ago is still true today. We will sell no wine before it's time.
How many of you remember that? We will sell no wine before it's time. I always think of that commercial whenever I read the scripture passage for today. Obviously, it's about wine. And then I also think about Jesus when his mother says they've run out of wine. Jesus says, "My hour has not yet come." And it makes me feel like he's kind of saying, "I will make no wine until it's time." And so I always think about that commercial when I think about this passage. This is the first sign that is mentioned in the Gospel of John. John has signs, not miracles. They're signs. And because they are signs, that means that they are meant to point to something beyond themselves. And the signs in the Gospel of John are kind of complicated. They're not straightforward at all. On the one hand, they are presented to us as if they provide evidence of Jesus' unique divinity. But on the other hand, they are also presented as though it requires faith to see them for what they truly are. So if you have to have faith first to see them for what they truly are, they're not really evidence for the unique divinity of Jesus. And then to make it even more complicated than that, sometimes in the Gospel of John, people are so impressed by the sign that they do not see what it's really all about. The miracle gets in the way. And the best example is when the folks are so impressed because Jesus has multiplied the loaves and made bread that they do not recognize that Jesus is the bread of life. So the signs in John are kind of complicated, and John builds his entire gospel around these signs. Now, in our story today, we have a wedding, the wedding at Cana, and weddings then, just as today, were very important and big events. When I think about weddings today, they are very much like dramatic productions. There is a main cast, a main character. Usually it's the wedding couple. So it could be the bride and the groom, or the bride and the bride, or the groom and the groom, depending on who's getting married. And they're the main characters, which is interesting because in this passage, the bride does not get a mention at all, something I'm sure makes her real happy. And the groom only gets a passing one-note reference. So they're not the main characters in this story, although they are the main characters at weddings. And then you've got the supporting cast. So you've got groomsmen if you have them, or bridesmaids if you have those. You have a ring bearer. You might have candle lighters. You'll have an officiant, or the minister, who does the wedding. And they are so much like theatrical productions that most weddings have a rehearsal and a director, so that people can go over ahead of time and hit their marks and know when to say their lines. So weddings are very much like theatrical productions. And in my life, I have played multiple roles in these wedding productions. When I was 4 years old, I was the ring bearer at my aunt's wedding, and I don't remember much at all about it except the minister was going to say, "Are there rings?" And I was supposed to step forward and say, "Yes, there are." And that's all I remember about that. And then I was a candle lighter for one of my friends in college when he got married, and it was disastrous. I just could not get all the candles lit. And it took forever, and the musician was playing a song by the Beatles, and I had not got through the first candelabra, and I thought that person's going to have to play every song in the Beatles catalog for me to get all these candles lit. So it didn't go well, and I never did that job again. And I don't do it here. I'm glad we've got somebody that does the candles. I've been a best man a few times. One time I did it just because I knew the guy, he needed somebody, and I said, okay, I'll do it. He was having a hard time finding people. They couldn't find a minister to do the ceremony because nobody believed in the couple. And so they found a funeral home director, agreed to do it. And this was in Town Creek, Alabama. I'll never forget it. And so during the ceremony, the funeral home director asked not once, not twice, but thrice, 3 times, if there was anyone present who opposed this union. So I thought he knows something that I don't, apparently. But, anyway, and then I've been the officiant. I've been the minister at many weddings. I've done first marriages, second marriages. I think I've done a third marriage. I've done inside traditional. I've done outside crazy. I've sweltered in 100-degree weather. I did a wedding in New Site, Alabama. It was an outdoor wedding under a temporary gazebo that had been put up. And during the ceremony, there was a lake just behind where we were. And during the ceremony, the groom's hunting dogs swam across the lake. He had told us he had put them up. He had not put them up. And they swam across the lake, and then during the ceremony, they came up right inside the wedding party where we were all standing and shook themselves dry. So I'll never forget that wedding. That was, and I've been a groom one time. I've been a groom once. And our wedding went pretty smoothly, thanks to Linda's mother, my mother-in-law, Patsy, who is very talented. She made all the bridesmaids' dresses, and she made all the food for the reception. And so she is a gem and a gift. And because of her, our ceremony and everything afterward went smoothly. Not so much for the couple at Cana. They had something terrible happen. A social faux pas. They ran out of wine. And in a hospitality-based culture, that was a huge source of embarrassment and shame. To run out of wine would bring shame on the couple and their families. So this was terrible. In the passage, it is the mother of Jesus who knows about this first. Now, interestingly enough, in John, she is never named. She is only the mother of Jesus. So we have to be careful about importing what we know about Mary from the other Gospels into John, because John could be operating from a very different kind of understanding. But it is the mother of Jesus who notices the issue and says to Jesus, they've run out of wine. And then Jesus gives a very interesting and I think calloused response. He says, woman, what does that have to do with me and you? And I think that's pretty calloused. And we have a lot of Christians today who respond that way when others are in need. That person doesn't have health insurance? Well, what is that to me and you? That person has fled persecution from another country to come into our country seeking safety? Well, but what is that to me and you? It reminds me a little bit of Cain's response to God when God asks Cain, where is your brother Abel? And Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? What is it to me? So Jesus kind of gives this callous response. But his mother knows him pretty well and just swipes that aside and turns to the servants and says, do whatever he tells you. And then Jesus tells the servants to go and fill the 6 stone water jars that are standing nearby for the ritual of hand washing. And we are told that each holds 20 to 30 gallons. And Jesus says, fill them all up with water, and the servants fill them up to the brim. And then Jesus tells them to take some to the chief steward. So they draw some of the water from the barrel, from the jar, and they take it to the chief steward, who tastes it, and it is wine. And the chief steward says, and you all heard it, says to the bridegroom, this is his one reference, usually you serve the good wine first, and you wait till everybody's drunk before you give them the cheap stuff. But you have saved the best wine for last. This is an interesting story to me. First of all, let's note that it could have been 180 gallons of wine, given the size of the jars that we're told. It's also we're not exactly clear when the sign takes place. The jars are filled with water. Jesus actually says, draw some water from the jar. But when the steward tastes it, it's wine. So when does the transformation occur? It's kind of mysterious. I'm not really sure what to make of this miracle. I also must admit that I'm a little bit bothered by it, because I don't know very much about wine. I was raised a Southern Baptist and did not drink wine until I was at Southern Baptist College with a Southern Baptist religion professor attending a Jewish Seder meal. But nevertheless, I know that wine takes time, because we will sell no wine before it's time. The grapes have to be grown and harvested and crushed, and yeast has to be added for fermentation to convert the sugar into alcohol, and then it requires being aged in barrels, and depending on what kind of wine you're making, that process differs a little bit for red and white. But it takes time, so that when you taste wine, part of what you're tasting is time. You can't just have wine instantaneously, because then you're not tasting the time. And I think about this as I try to make sense of this story. And I think that one way of reading this story is as a healing story for shame. This couple would have been shamed had it got out that they had run out of wine, and Jesus heals that by providing this wine. But when I think about healing, healing has to go as deep as the pain. Healing has to be as thorough as the suffering. And there is so much suffering in this world. I think about this country, the history of our racist attitudes, going back through segregation, Jim Crow, slavery, over 400 years of sorrow and suffering. And that can't be fixed like that. It takes time, and it takes hard work. And so I don't know quite what to make of this miracle, where the water becomes wine instantaneously. You know, yeast in the New Testament is sometimes a good thing and sometimes a bad thing. It's a bad thing when the New Testament talks about it ruining everything that it touches. It's a good thing in the New Testament when it talks about how transformational it can be. And so I think about this, yeast can be good or bad, and I think about all the people who claim the name Christian and how that also is done by people who are good and bad. And there are a lot of Christians who have been working very hard to make sour wine. And it feels as though in this last week we've opened barrel after barrel after barrel of soured wine. Of wine that comes from Christians for centuries, acting like racists, being homophobic, being power hungry, wanting to boss everybody around. And they've made sour wine after sour wine, and we keep opening these barrels. And sour wine is what was offered to Jesus on the cross in the Gospel of John. And it's hard to see barrel after barrel of soured wine that was made by Christians in our past. And what I know is that it is our job as people who claim the name of Christ to be the positive agents of yeast, to do the transformational work, the hard work of turning water into wine, of turning the world's tears into fine wine. And that's hard. And we don't understand exactly how it always works. It's mysterious. We know we play a role in it, but we know God adds something to it that is beyond us. And we know that it's incumbent upon us to be those agents of transformation. And we work, and it takes time. And the fact is, the barrels that we're making will be opened long after we are gone. So we may not see the good wine that we are making. But it is our job to keep doing it, to keep trusting that process. And so I think of this story, if this story is anything, it is at least a glimpse of the joy and the celebration that happens whenever good wine is opened. And we can trust that God is working with us for those days when the barrels that we're making will be opened and there will be good wine instead of sour wine. We don't always know that what we've done has worked. When I was the pastor at the Cedar Bluff First United Methodist Church in Alabama, we started a Sunday school satellite program in a housing project that was near the church. And our church people, none of our church people lived in it. Those folks did not look like us. They were poorer than we were. But we wanted to build a relationship, not a charitable thing, a relationship. And so we started the Sunday school satellite. And we befriended a woman named Sherry, who was a single mother who struggled with addiction and who had been the victim of domestic violence. But she really responded to us and became kind of our representative in that community, and she had a little kid named Brandon, and she worked really hard to try to make a better life. And she worked with us, and we worked with her, and we got her through some difficult days. She did not always make good decisions. And we had to walk with her with some accountability, but also with some grace. And then, as happens in the Methodist Church, I got moved to another church. I do not know what happened to Sherry. I do not know what happened to her and her son, Brandon. I can trust and hope that that's a barrel that has been open since I left that made good wine. But I don't know. And the fact is, we will not know the results of our labors. Many churches feel like when they have to stop a ministry or end a program, that it is a terrible failure. But that isn't true. Because everything a church does that tries to be transformational is putting the work, is adding the good yeast in the barrel. And we do not know when it will be opened, and we may not be there to see the good wine that we make. So take this story about the wedding at Cana, where Jesus moves from kind of reluctance to doing the work, and the wine that is opened is tasted, and it is better than what went before. And take that as a promise of the sign that the Gospel of John starts with. A promise made to us and to all who are doing the work and who may not be here when the time is fulfilled.